Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true firsthand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. So one of my main goals for this podcast is having the opportunity to have people on who not only know and understand the world of plant medicines and psychedelics, but also those that have had the direct experience of living amongst the people and tribes from which these medicines were originally found and practiced. The guest we have joining us today fits both of these categories. He has spent time amongst the tribes, such as the Sequoia elders in the jungles of the Amazon and Costa Rica, has integrated those experiences and the wisdom stemming from them to create his business in self-mastery coaching, is the host of the Battered Souls podcast, and is the man behind the popular Waking Times website, which is dedicated to the evolution of the individual and speaks to subjects including shamanism, personal awakening, wellness, and navigating the world we all live in. So, with all of that being said, please help me in welcoming my man, Dylan Charles, to the show. Dylan, thank you for being here, my man. What's up?
Oh man, it's a real honor to speak with you, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. That was a cool intro, and I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this. I've been on a number of podcasts, and this will be the first one that's I would say like this one sounds like it's going to be the most fun. Let me put it that way.
Yes, that's my objective with this, and really, the other podcast I have is more based on, people's journeys and the tools they've used to become highly optimized. And what I found was a lot of the episodes were with people that I know and love and that have loved plant medicines. And I started noticing the conversations. I wanted to go more into plant medicine stuff. And I didn't want to take away from all the other tools that people use to have become highly optimized. So I was like, you know what? I got to start another podcast, or translate that. I get to start another podcast. And so this one is pure about going down the rabbit hole, man. And I'm so excited to have you here to be going down this rabbit hole and to hear all about your journey with psychedelics and everything they've allowed your life to become since interacting with them. And a part that I love starting at with the journey of psychedelics is how you were first introduced to psychedelics. I mean, for me, I've noticed that a lot of people grew up with the DARE program, grew up with these things that have allowed them to have certain beliefs around psychedelics. And then moving into obviously adulthood and forming different beliefs, somewhere along the way, you decided to give psychedelics a try. And so I'd love to frame that story. Like, how did you first become introduced to them? And then take us through, a brief history of what's happened since then. And then we can dive into that more.
That's a cool question. I mean, we're all part of the same culture here. I imagine, I'm from the United States. I'm from Austin, Texas. That's where I grew up. There wasn't a whole lot of talk about psychedelics. It was very much an underground thing back then, as were all drugs. I think the important points with my story is that during my childhood, there was a significant amount of trauma, chaos, drama, divorce, some abuse in there, and stuff. And so that sort of pushed me into a spot where I was seeking safety, seeking escape, early on in life. I think like a lot of people, especially a lot of men, I had a good childhood. My mother raised us well, but I definitely never felt safe. And so the result of that is that, I picked up tobacco, and when my grandpa left some empty cigarettes, half smoked cigarettes in my yard when I was 12. I started hitting my mom's liquor cabinet when I was 14, and, blackout drinking by the time I was 15, liquor. I think a lot of people can relate to that. Those are other cultural influences that are at us as well. And in that experience of kind of realizing that I was more of an underworld kind of I was different, right? Like I was looking for satisfaction in different ways than the jocks and the intellectuals and that sort of thing, And so I do remember the first time we took acid. A friend of mine, I was probably 17. I must have been like a junior, maybe a senior in high school, and we scored a hit acid somewhere. We were scared of it, like, what is this stuff? There's no proper education. You did mention the DARE program. I remember when I was in second or third grade and the DARE officers came to our school and they passed around a giant bag of weed and a bag of Coke, which looking back is pretty fucking demented, to be honest with you. Like we were in elementary school. That experience alone. I mean, they sat there in the classroom and they lit up some kind of grass that smelled like weed. I mean, we're freaking 10 years old, man. And so they did their best to traumatize us. And, I remember holding this big gallon-sized bag of weed and being like, wow, this is the stuff they're talking about. This is the dangerous stuff. But so yeah, when it came time, we actually were able to score a hit of acid. We split it in half because we were afraid of what it did. And to this day, I don't even know if acid actually did anything to us at all. But we sat and we stared in the mirror. We stared in that mirror for hours, looking for traces, looking for signs of life, looking for distortions in reality. And, ultimately nothing really happened. And I think it was a year after that or so, I got a hit of acid, and it did one of those things where it just triggered colors and tracers and that sort of stuff. But what it did for me, Ryan, at that point was it sort of started to answer a question that I hadn't realized that I was asking, and that was the question of all the seekers, right? Like the question of the seekers, like what is out there? What is beyond? What is the mystery? How can I touch the mystery? Like, how can I escape this reality in search of something bigger than this reality? I think this is one of the problems with the culturalization of psychedelics the way it is now, is because I didn't understand what LSD would do. I didn't understand what the other possibilities and options were. And so it triggered the seeker in me. And so that sent me down into the underworld even further. And on that path, especially back in the day in the 90s, like, where does that lead to, man? It leads to more alcohol. Take mushrooms to have an experience, understand yourself in a more deep way, mix it with alcohol. You don't do acid to sort of like reach out and make a connection with God. You don't do it for that. You just do it to get fucked up. And, you mix it with painkillers, or you mix it with ecstasy. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a totally different experience. And so I went through that as a raver and a rave DJ and stuff. I went through that through the 90s and the early 2000s. And, the truth for me is that road led me into the hard drugs. It led me into serious methamphetamine addiction for several years. And that took me several years beyond that just to get it completely out of my life. And, that almost took me out. That took me into depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, all the stuff that they could diagnose me with. It took me into, being near suicidal, trying to recover and recapture my life from the depths of a methamphetamine addiction, which is not easy, man. I know a lot of people who didn't make it out and are still stuck there or aren't even alive. Yeah. So for the first many, many times that I did LSD or mushrooms, it was just a party drug, and I didn't really ever have a ceremonial context for it. Until much later in life, I decided to leave my hometown of Austin, Texas in 2008. We lived on the West Coast for a little while. And while I was training Kung Fu on the West Coast, I had a training buddy at my Kung Fu school. I had him come over to help me with a very esoteric form of Qigong that I needed help with. He had to do some work on me. That's a whole nother story. But and we did the work. And so we came over, and afterwards, we were talking about life and the things that we'd been through. And he had gone through a serious cocaine and crack cocaine addiction. And so he had survived the hard chemical stuff, the stuff that people are looking, when they're seekers looking for ways, but the stuff that's available, not the stuff that really can take them where they're wanting to go. And so in that conversation afterwards, we realized we had a lot in common, but he mentioned this substance called ayahuasca. I'd never heard of it. And I thought I'd never heard of it. And it blew my mind. I was like, are you kidding me? There's something stronger than acid. There's something stronger than mushrooms. Like, no way, bro. Like, really? And when he described it to me, and just in a few short sentences, I mean, we didn't have a deep conversation about it. When he described it to me, like in my mind, I saw all of the National Geographic spreads, all of the journeys that all the anthropologists made down to these hinterlands in Africa and the Amazon and stuff, and in search of these mysterious potions and just like the cultural fascination with diving deep into some deep naturalist culture to find some magical substance. And I thought all that was bullshit, basically. So when he told me, I was like, wow, you mean there's something else out there? And I sort of just put it out of my mind.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? I wanted to stop by while I had your ear and share a very special announcement with you. You may have heard people say that we are facing an epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. We believe that this is only half of the story, and that the real epidemic and the root of feeling loneliness is a lack of connection. Do you want to connect to more purpose and passion with the important work you are doing? Do you wish you had closer friendships with people who understand you, listen to you, and are truly present with you? Are you wishing you and your partner could move deeper into love together? The connection in all of these areas comes down to the one most important element of connection: the ability to connect with yourself. If you are ready to see change in your life, if you are ready to feel differently when you wake up in the morning, if you are ready to step into the life you envision for yourself, the first and only route to making these changes is settling in, quieting down, and being able to connect to yourself. Now, this can be a major challenge in today's world with media, culture, and other energies that pull us out of our ability to connect. When you've tried fitness, meditation, and other self-development practices and still find yourself feeling alone and lacking connection, you may be feeling out of options and wondering if you'll ever be able to tap into your full potential that you know deep down is possible in your life. What we have found in working with our clients is that plant medicines, and cannabis in particular, can guide us in having the experience of what true connection looks and feels like. In this way, cannabis can act as a rite of passage for connection and a gateway toward the spouse, tribe, mission, and life you know you are ready for. Now, the pitfall here is that many people become codependent on the medicines, such as cannabis, and expect the medicine to do the work for them. If this continues, what will happen is the user will find themselves reaching for more and more cannabis to feel connection, without taking ownership of their role in the outcome of their experience, and thus they will fall into repeating the same painful patterns. As Zen Buddhism teaches, how you do anything is how you do everything. Therefore, if this painful pattern is showing up in your relationship with cannabis, it is likely a reflection of the same patterns you're experiencing in your friendships, romantic relationships, business, and your relationship with yourself. Learning to work with cannabis effectively will supercharge your experience and will help you get the result you are actually seeking, which is connection. We created a program to support seekers and high achievers like you in doing exactly this: to learn how to work with the healing power of cannabis to connect you back to yourself so you can unlock purpose, passion, and creativity in all areas of your life. What this program will give you is the long-lost user manual for cannabis. This user manual will teach you how to connect with cannabis correctly so that the plant can act as your spiritual aid and ally in life, just as our ancestors understood and practiced. If you're ready to unlock the full power of cannabis, meet like-minded people on the same path as you, build more purpose into your life, and have the most fun doing homework you've ever had, this message is for you. To learn more and qualify for your spot in the program, hop over to our Instagram profile at highly.optimized and book a discovery call. The conscious cannabis revolution is here. Will you be joining us? Sending all of you love. Enjoy the rest of the show.
6 months later, my wife and I sold everything. Just this another set of circumstances. We sold all of our stuff, packed up our 2 children, and we flew to Costa Rica with 5 duffel bags and 2 kids, with the intention of staying there for a year. We ended up staying there for 7 years. When I went down to Costa Rica, I took a big box of books with me, and so I had a bunch of stuff to read. And at that time, I was reading a whole lot about history and just personal awakening, a lot of stuff about Kundalini and all these kind of things. I was really looking for modalities to help me elevate and evolve out of the person I had been. And one of the books I took was called The Cosmic Serpent by a man named Jeremy Narby. Perhaps you're familiar with it. And that whole book he's an anthropologist, and that whole book is about his experiences going down to the Amazon in search of this mysterious substance, ayahuasca, and, not finding it right away, but finding a whole lot of people that had a whole lot to teach him about plants and plant medicines and other, non-psychedelic plant medicines. And so what he realized quite quickly is there was this ginormous pharmacopoeia of medicines and wisdom down there that wasn't available to us in the West. And so through his relations with some of the people that he met, he finally was able to get an entryway into the world of ayahuasca. And so he did ceremonies with ayahuasca, and he came to the conclusion, or sort of the connection that he made, was that through these medicines, you could access human DNA. So he was, as an anthropologist, he was looking at cave drawings, in France and Africa and around the world, and seeing these familiar symbols of the double helix showing up in different ways in all of these ancient, ancient hand-drawn art forms, right? These things that have lasted tens of thousands of years. And so he was asking the question of how is it that all of these people and cultures from around the world are like seeing the same imagery? Like where are they getting this from? And so when he took ayahuasca, he basically had the experience of seeing how that double helix, how that structure, how that the DNA presents itself to the human mind when you're deep inside of the human mind. And so he asked some of his shamans and tutors in this area, what is this stuff about? And they said, well, out of the 80 or so thousand available plants in the Amazon, you take these two plants and you mix them up in a certain way and you cook them in a certain way for a certain length of time and you drink that substance. As a gambling man, if you were to look at the odds of how long it would take somebody to discover that, it would take eons, right? Well, he's like, well, how did you guys know? And the answer was that tobacco told them that they were able to ingest tobacco, and through tobacco, which they had learned to refer to as the mother of all plants, basically told them, say, hey, go mix this with this and do this and see what happens. And so there was that great mystery. Right about the time that I started reading this book, I'd never heard of ayahuasca, but a friend of mine, a friend that I had known back on the West Coast, sent me an email saying, hey, I'm going to go down to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca. You want to come with me? And I was like, whoa, you can do that? Like, I don't have anthropological credentials. Yeah, I'll do that. And he ended up never making it, but he put me in touch with a man named Jonathan Miller Weisberger, who's been my teacher and good friend ever since. It was a calling, man. You probably experienced this. Yes. It's a calling. Like some things pass in front of your purview, in front of your vision, and they just go. You don't have an attachment to them, but some things come to you and you're just pulled, you're drawn. There's a magnetism to it. And I didn't understand it. I really didn't even understand. Like the book didn't really explain the actual experience of it. It didn't explain the purging. It didn't explain the connection to the grandmother's spirit or anything like that. And so I said, honey, we had two small kids. I said, honey, I got to go on this retreat. I'll be gone for 12 days, 11 days. I know it's expensive. She was a little scared and put off by it, but I was like, I know that this is abnormal for me. By that time, I'd already been married, 14 or 15 years. And so, it was a shock to her, but I went and she said, hey, I see that this is something that you need to do. Go, I'll take care of the kids. You don't have to call me. You don't have to email me. I can tell this is pulling you in a direction that you need to go in. I can tell that there's something to this. And I want you to be able to focus on that. I want you to be able to focus on yourself and figure out what the hell it is that you need, because I need you to be the best man that you can be here for this family. The thing about it is when I look back on those times, Ryan, like men, like people, especially guys like me, we were fucked up, man. Like I was drinking alcohol as much as I could drink. I had no control over my anger. I just had no like sense of really like solid sense of direction. I had gotten a corporate job and worked for 10 years and I knew that wasn't for me. And so I abandoned that career before I went to Costa Rica, and I knew that I had something in me. I knew that I was capable of something much, much more. And she saw it too. And so when I went, I remember the last time I really had a good screaming match with her was about 3 weeks before I went. And I just, got drunk and lost control and did that whole stupid needy thing that a lot of guys do, when a woman's in a weird mood and they just can't let it go. What's wrong, honey? What's wrong? You got to tell me what's wrong. What's wrong? I just drove her crazy and drove myself crazy. And in the process, got violent and kicked the doors and the neighbors came over and, just this whole, this just embarrassing experience of just like having no self-control, brother, just no self-control. And I remember journaling like the days after that, being like, oh God, please, something enter my life to help me get control of myself. The alcohol isn't helping, I can smoke pounds of weed and it doesn't seem to like make me a better person, So I went, man. And I went and really, really unique experience. I went down to my friend's place. He's built an eco lodge in a very remote part of Costa Rica on the beach. And it's quite an amazing experience. It's like a 5-hour drive from the town I was in Costa Rica, and then an hour and a half boat ride from that town, and then a 20-minute hike down the beach from the boat ride. So it's literally out in the middle of nowhere. You can't even access it by car. And when I walked up to the beachfront after all this traveling, there were two indigenous elders from the Sequoia tribe in Amazon there that were hanging out, smiling, smoking tobacco, wearing pink tunics, hanging out on the beach, and just like I'd never physically been in the presence of anyone like this, like a short, dark skinned, just a winning smile, just the heart energy from him was so big and so vibrant that you're just drawn to their like their peacefulness, their joy, and so And then we started our week of ceremonies, and maybe we can get into some of that, but that's how I was introduced to what I would say was ceremonial medicine. And since that experience, I've never looked at it the same. I've been able to make a clear distinction that certain medicines are for good times and certain medicines are for healing,
Yes.
And so I definitely think ayahuasca is one that you want to get the healing out of it,
Definitely. So, wow. That's amazing, man. It's so incredible too, because in so many instances that you were chatting about, you were talking about that feeling, that calling, right? And we all have those things inside of us, right? To use binary language, we all do, but it's true. We all have some intuitive call. And the challenge I see is that most of us have minds that have been going to the gym and pumping iron since we were 6 years old, entering grade school, without actually knowing how to use that tool. So it's almost like building a bomb that you don't know is a bomb, right? And so without the awareness of things like the heart, things like the fact that we are pure awareness and we have a mind to help us, but we are not the mind, without any of those principles, it's no wonder that so many people get stuck in a lot of the same things that you were challenged with, and a lot of the same things I've been challenged with anxiety, substance abuse, things like that, because we never understand how the mind works and how the mind can rope us into these programs that make us feel, okay, we probably don't even have the awareness of this, but the whole idea is that we're feeling something that we don't even probably know what it is. And therefore the mind goes, we want to feel better. And so then we run through a list of things in our mind. What will help us feel better? Okay, well, alcohol in this situation that we're talking about, right? That's made me feel better even once before, right? And so fuck all the other experiences that have led to me losing my control. It's helped me feel better before. I'm doing that, right? And so this is like how the mind works if we don't have that awareness, right? And, I love that you brought us through that journey of really like what brought you to that was a form of rock bottom, right? Realizing like, I am losing control and I need something to free me from this, right? I need me to free me from this.
Right. Like, I want to jump in here and say something because another big part of my story, and I want to say this because I know there's people listening, there's probably guys out there listening. I know people have gone through this, and I went through it, and I was alone when I went through it. But in 2003 or so, when I hit rock bottom with the drugs and alcohol and the pills and the snortables and just all that shit, and it's like, I'm kind of a unique case. My wife and I got married when I was 21. We've been together since I was 19. And so by the time I was 25, 26, we'd already been married for several years. And, in hindsight, we probably got married too young, but that's great now. Like, we're doing super, super good. Like, the payoff has been extraordinary for sticking it out. Like, to have someone that loves you and knows you that deeply your whole life is truly a sacred gift. But at the time, we were kind of going our separate ways. She had decided to go back to the University of Texas and pursue her master's degree in business. And I was, I just finished up my bachelor's degree, and I was really trying to find my way in the corporate world and stuff. But I was also still had one foot in the party world, and she had stepped out of the party world. And I didn't have the courage, really, to be honest. I didn't have the courage really to leave her behind and go pursue, whatever other desires, whether it were sexual desires or other women and stuff. And so I sort of like put a big lid of repression over myself at that time in my life. And looking back, it's truthfully, man, there's some embarrassment and there's some shame about it. But like, I know, because I've done work with plant medicine in a couple of different centers, and I've talked to many, many men, and I've helped many men through this. But that sense of repressing your natural desires, especially your sexuality and stuff at that point, can lead to all kind of anomalies and all kind of distortions and what should be healthy behavior. And so in my case, it was like, working for the weekend. On the weekend, she would go to bed and I would party as much as I could, but I would always end up in my studio alone with a pile of drugs, whatever I could get from my friends, and a big bottle of liquor and fucking tobacco and weed and stuff and music. And then, where to put all that energy, where to put all that youthful energy. And of course I got sucked into pornography and like the shame and guilt and involved with, sitting around, doing that to yourself. It's very, very, very toxic to the spirit. It's very toxic to your soul. And so that experience of really just like drilling myself down into the rock bottom, into my own little world, to my own tiny little bubble, where I've just created this protective bubble of isolation around me, and was using all these drugs to put a shield between myself and the world. And that literally almost killed me, man. Like, some things happened in that space that almost caused me to take my own life. And I had a moment where I had a moment where I realized that I needed help. I needed help, man. I needed fucking help. And so I went to my doctor and I told him everything that happened, man. And I could see that. I remember the look on his face, man. He was like, "Oh God, fucking check this guy out." And he's like, "Well, He's like, gee whiz, you doing all that? And, and oh, you doing cocaine? Oh, geez. Oh, and I told him everything just because I needed to talk to someone, Ryan.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'd cut myself off from the whole fucking world. And I thought I could trust this guy, and I was wrong. But so his response was, yeah, okay, take this antipsychotic, antidepressant medicine. Here's a prescription for Xanax, which to me was another party drug. And, try to keep yourself together for the next few days. I'm going to book you an appointment with the city's leading psychiatrist. I want you to go see this guy next week, man. And so I immediately had a reaction to the antidepressants and the antipsychotics. I mean, like physical shaking, like dissociativeness. I had like prostate fluid leaking out of my penis and stuff. And I called him up. I was like, dude, what's coming out of me? Like, what the fuck is going on? And I got him on the phone. This was 3 days later. And I was like, doctor, like, what the fuck is happening to me? And he literally said to me, he said, it's okay, man. You'll get used to the side effects. Big red flag,
dude.
Big fucking red flag.
Yeah.
Right? So the next week, I had an appointment with this very, very prominent psychiatrist. He was the head of the psychiatry board for my town and stuff. I won't mention his name, but maybe that son of a bitch is listening.
So, let's hope he is, so he learns something.
Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's listening from heaven or hell, or purgatory he ended up in. But so I go in this guy's office, man, and I want to tell this story because I want people to know, man, that there's a couple different paradigms for healing yourself, man. And we're often confused about what our choices are, if we even have any choices, and so it's the same thing that's kind of going on with the COVID stuff. If you don't know what the alternative treatments are, that because they're not, they're being censored, or they're being pushed out of your vision, then you think that there's only this one choice. And that's what I thought. I thought I only had this one choice. I went to my doctor, super great guy. He sent me to the best guy in town. I sit in this guy's office, immediately get the vibe like this guy isn't for me. I clam up. I won't talk to him. He's like, what's going on, young man? What's going on, young man? I was 26, Ryan. And I was like, well, gee whiz, I don't know, man. It's the first visit. Maybe over a couple of visits, I can get to know you. He's like, well, let's try to see if we can help you out here and tell him what's going on. I was like, well, you know what, man, let's flip the script here a little bit. Let me get to know you a little bit first. Okay. So I started quizzing him, man. And I said to this old dude, he was probably in his 60s or later. And I said to this old dude, I said, well, tell me something. I said, how much money do you make? He looks at me right now, man. He goes, I make $450,000 a year. I've got properties in Durango, Colorado, Chiapas, Mexico, Westlake Hills, Austin, Texas. I've got a Cessna 430B or whatever the fuck I got, And I was like, wow, that's impressive. Yeah. And he's like, yeah. And he was super proud of himself. And another big red flag, right? This is not my vibe.
Yeah.
On the wall next to his desk, I've been looking at the whole time in this appointment, was just all kinds of memorabilia from the Vietnam War, pictures and shit, young men, and airstrips and shit, and fucking, like fruit salads and, what I mean? Like medals and all this stuff. And so I said to him, I was like, well, doctor, tell me something else. He's like, yeah, anything you want. I was like, I see on your wall here that looks like you're probably involved in Vietnam. And he was like, yes, I was. And I was, yes, I was. I said, okay, that's cool. I said, what did you do? What was your role in Vietnam? He goes, I was a fighter bomber pilot. I was like, all right, fighter bomber pilot. And just came right out of my mouth. I looked him dead in the eye and I said, how many people have you killed? I had an apocalypse now moment with this guy. You're talking about Colonel Kurtz here right in front of me. He looks in his eyes glass over, and he looks at me dead in the eye, 1,000-yard stare right in the eye. And he says, thousands, just like that. So I'm literally in the office of a mass murderer, describe it how literally a mass murderer. I'm like, a man just admitted to me that he has killed thousands and thousands of people. I mean, the gravity of the situation did not escape me whatsoever. So we like pussyfooted around for a bit, finished the appointment. And then I shit you not, man, I left with 7 different medications that I was supposed to take every day. I was 26. I was supposed to take this one for the rest of my life, that one for the rest of the month, this one for the rest of the week. I was supposed to up the dose of this one when I drop the dose of that one. I was supposed to take this one to help me sleep after all. I was supposed to take this one to help me wake up after all. I mean, he gives me a bag of free samples from his office. So this mass murderer hands me a bag of medicine, and I walk out of the office and I walk into the parking lot, and the sun is shining on my face. And it's like spirit reached out and fucking just tapped me on the forehead and said, son, this is a defining moment in your life, man. Which path are you going to choose? Which way are you going to go, man? Who are you going to allow to be responsible for your health? Who are you going to allow to take responsibility for your happiness? No brainer at all. It was like, I've been to the best of the best in town, and this is what they have to offer. I either die on this path or I go it alone. And I dumped all that shit in his trash can in front of his office and never looked back. I started Kung Fu a few weeks later. maybe it was only like a week or two later, but within 3 weeks of doing Kung Fu 3, 4, 5 times a week, I was like, the depression I was experiencing was gone. I was starting to get some strength, and the anxiety had subsided, and I was around a group of people that actually gave a shit about me and wanted me to be healthy and strong and kick ass. Right. And they wanted to show me the way. And so that experience there, I think is really, really critical for people to understand. You have choices. You have two choices. You can either take responsibility for yourself, or you can abdicate that responsibility to the system that we have. And it may work for some people, but the power and authority you can get in your own life by doing it yourself, by taking control of your own life, is really the way is the way to be for a man today. We need strong men, and you've got to take responsibility for that. So when I ended up finally journeying with ayahuasca, and the people that I drink with, we call it yahe. So I'm going to use that word yahe from now on. And there's some subtle differences in the two brews, the way it's made and the way the ceremonies are conducted. But so when I first was introduced to the world of ayahuasca or yahe, I very much had been like off of all the drugs and everything for probably 6 years, but it was very much an opportunity to really. That was the first time I really had a chance to look deeply at what the hell was troubling me, where all the pain came from, where all the desire to isolate, where all the need to just freaking destroy myself came from. And drinking ayahuasca, drinking yahe with the Sequoia, it took me 2.5, 3 years of drinking with them several times a year to get through what I would say is like the personal processing, to get through that, to get beyond all of that. What's wrong with me? Oh, great spirit, please help me be less angry. Oh, great spirit, please help me to live with more compassion. Oh, great spirit, please help me to show up for others. Oh, great spirit, heal me of the trauma of the past. Oh, great spirit, help me to let go of this pain. And that took quite a couple few years of drinking steadily with these gentlemen. And so there's a big healing opportunity in it.
Yeah, man. And, that's so beautiful too, because what you perfectly said there, I mean, with everything going on right now in the world of COVID and everything, these things are so important, right? It's not that, we're going to tell people what side they should choose, but we're going to tell them that they do have a choice, right? Like they have a choice in this. And this applies to any area of your life. Whenever you think you only have one choice, it's a sign that you need to get more curious, right? Or that you should be getting more curious. For me, how I always decipher all of the information in the world, because let's face it, we have more information than ever, right? So a lot of it is just like analysis paralysis, right? Like, how are we supposed to dive through all this, right? Should I interact with plant medicine? Should I not? Should I, get a vaccine? Should I, all this stuff, right? How I always tell people, right, is whatever results you want in your life, get clear on that, and then find the people getting the results you want. And that will be a very good idea for what you should choose, right? Because results don't lie. Right? The media lies, people can look a certain way. I mean, how many bodybuilders do you know that fucking hate themselves? Right? So people idolize a bodybuilder, but really they don't understand that whole life has a lot of other, things included in it that can challenge you. And so for me, I always tell people, just look at whoever's getting the results you want and pay attention to them, because their results do not lie. And, something I'm curious about for you is, why do you feel certain people in this lifetime are curious about the things that we're both curious about? And I imagine everyone listening to the show are curious about, what do you think? I imagine that you might believe what I believe, which is that we are infinite. We're infinite beings and we have infinite times to figure this out, right? And go around. Why do you think it's this life, right? Why do you think it's this life that we're at that point where now the pain point is high enough where we're like, yeah, we're going to figure this out. We have the awareness that we might be destructing ourselves and doing things that are not in alignment with our highest and greatest and grandest good. And so why do you think we're at that point now? What makes someone get to that point in the evolution of a soul, if you want to go there?
That's an interesting question. Like, I'm in a unique spot because I have been with the same woman for, we've been together for 27 years, and, she's done acid and she's done mushrooms and stuff, but she's never done a boga. I have a lot of history with the plant medicine from Africa, boga as well. She's never done that. She's never done ayahuasca. And, if you ask her why not, she says that she doesn't want to do it. Why doesn't she want to do it? And she doesn't really have a clear answer to that a lot of times, but there's been a couple of moments when she's spoken from a place that you kind of feel like is the truth. And it's one time she said to me, I'm not ready to face the trauma that I have. I'm not ready to face, the pain that I have from the relationships I had when I was young, whatever's happened in my family, whatever, everybody's goes through their shit. She just wasn't ready to deal with it. There's that dynamic of somebody who's honest and is willing to say, I don't want to face that. okay. Like I've never been an advocate of these medicines. I never suggest or recommend them to them, but if people are curious about them, I will point the way with glee.
Mm-hmm.
Another dimension of it too is, I think, is that when I was young, I remember, and even my mom told me this recently, that I was an old soul. My brother was a young soul. I was an old soul. My older brother was the young soul. The younger brother was the old soul, And so there's a certain point at our soul's evolution where we have the capacity to take in, we have the capacity to receive, we have the capacity to understand more, if that makes sense.
Totally.
So on an individual level, not everybody's ready to face that. I have many friends that, a number of friends that won't do ayahuasca because they're afraid of that. They'll tell you, I just don't want to, I'm afraid of the puking.
Mm-hmm.
These same people will drink till they puke. You know what I mean? Like that's not foreign to them at all. They're not ready to process that kind of healing, and they don't know why. Right. So if you extrapolate that, you look at the bigger picture of it, like, human beings have been around for a long time. And, I would say what triggered me was being at that state of my soul's evolution, where I needed both these kind of big experiences to help me see the bigger picture. But in order to prompt me to seek out these or to allow myself to be called to these bigger experiences, I had to experience a certain amount of suffering and pain, right? Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like I just was like happy-go-lucky, let's go see what the world has to offer. No, I was driven. I was driven to these experiences through pain and suffering. And I've worked at a couple of different medicine centers for a number of years. And I've seen a lot of people come through, man. And the vast majority of people that come through are motivated by their pain and their suffering. And so I think that with the point that we're at with the evolution of the world, with the evolution of the human race, I think that we've reached critical mass. I mean, it's hard to avoid the stress. It's hard to avoid the pressure. It's hard to avoid the debauchery. It's hard to avoid the uncleanliness of this place. It's hard to get through all that without being stained and tainted and polluted and toxified and just beaten down. And that's, it's kind of the reason why I call my podcast Battered Souls, because I think there's a great number of us who've been beaten down, and it's like, we're still souls, man. Like we're still souls. All growth is growth, whether it's painful growth or joyful growth. And so I think that what's really pushing people, especially in the West, is this paradigm that we live under presents so much stress. It's so hypocritical too. Like it defies logic. It forces you to abandon reason to accept some of the dichotomies in this world. You know what I mean? Like, so yes. It assaults your reason. It assaults your common sense. It assaults your sense of, just holisticness of what life should be, And so I think that pressure cooker on them takes its toll on people. And so a lot of the people that seek out these experiences are just doing so as a way to address either their personal pain or the global pain, the suffering that we're all experiencing together, perhaps.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. And, what I heard out of that too was, like Paul Chek talks about all the time, the pain teacher, right? Like pain can teach us a lot, right? Because when pain gets into us, it takes our attention, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, in most cases, I would honestly argue for every case, there's a lesson waiting to be learned in that pain. And Absolutely. that's where, before you understand that, or put it more personal, before I understood that, that's when I would fall into cycles of anxiety, self-loathing, all of these things, right? Destruction, anger, all of these things, because I would try to run from that feeling. Then at a certain point, like you were saying, my fear of staying the same outweighed the fear of change. And then I had the pain point that was big enough to say, all right, you know what? I surrender in some way, shape, or form, which is such a great lesson for plant medicines. And therefore I started seeking. And when I was seeking, I wasn't exactly sure what I was seeking, though I knew it was something, if that makes sense, right? I knew there was something big that I was missing. Like, here's the point, and then I'm missing it all. Like, that's like, and it was just, it was looking around, especially like, I think, really one of the memories that stands out for me is, I was working at a job, and I was actually working at a Staples when I was like 19. Like, you want to talk about like the most brutal opposite end of the spectrum of everything I'm meant to do? Put me in a Staples, all right, wearing suit pants. Like, good God. And I
can't see it. I can't see it.
It was terrible, man. It was terrible. And you also talk about one of the most boring subjects ever. It's like office supplies, right? And I actually have a whole joke I say around that, where if something is weird, I say, yeah, it smells like office supplies, you know? And, you know, what happened was one day I had a conversation. I was working the register and this guy came in. I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's like, oh, you know, life sucks, then you die. And I was like, okay. And I continued to have this conversation, and every answer was just like a run of the mill answer. And something clicked in me where I was like, I don't ever want to do this again. I quit my job that day. I started getting into other things. And I actually ended up working at a porn store for a little while. That's a story for another day, but it was much more fun anyway than working at a Staples. And so, you know, I realized in that moment that there was something that, you know, the people that I was seeing that were supposedly the adults were not getting. And even at that age, I did not know how to articulate it, but they weren't getting the results I wanted. And yet, therefore, and then at the same time, people were expecting me to listen to people like that. And something was just severely off there. And so then I started questioning everything. And that's where plant medicines came in, you know?
Seekers. Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's really, I've been a seeker for a long time. That's blended over into politics and, you know, just a lot of the other stuff that's going on in the world. But the experiences with plant medicine, I mean, those are something that sit with my heart. I mean, you know, like I think about them almost every single day, you know, when I go out into the world, you know, they've had such an effect of changing my perspective on the world so deeply. And, you know, some of that, like seeing with the paradigms that we have now, the controlling nature of you know, the political scene right now, and even like the societal scene, you know, people, you know, getting involved in your business, so what you should put in your body and whatnot, you know, these paradigms, it's like, I really don't feel like I fit in here. You know, I really don't feel like I really don't feel like I belong in this place. Like I wasn't meant to do the same things that so many other people are doing. And so, yeah, I mean, to me, like plant medicines are just something I absolutely cherish. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where a lot of like the great men's work that we've both done with Alpha Hippie and that you've done, and, you know, they really come in, because the reason, like, there's a lot of people, for everyone listening. I mean, you can listen to Dylan and I right now too. It's, you know, a lot of people are feeling this way right now, and it's easy to get stuck into the lone wolf mentality. Well, you know, that limiting belief of, oh, I'm the only one, and now I have to isolate, right? And become scared. And what I invite everyone to realize is that, you know, although the world is scary right now, if you end up getting scared in all of this, you let them win, right? Because they're getting into your mind, which is really what the media and all these people are literally meant to do. They are a business. The same way, I mean, you know, you're a coach, so you get this. It's like find people's pain point and then go with it. We use white magic when it's coaching, but if you think people aren't out there using black magic, knowing exactly what to say to elicit responses, emotional, you know, responses in your being, you're wrong, you know, because they are doing that. They are the most challenging thing is thinking these people are stupid. They're not stupid. They're just using their powers for bad. I mean, it's like the Sith Lords. The Sith Lords weren't dumb, or they wouldn't have learned how to build a Death Star. They just were coming from a place of lack. They were coming from a place of no thing, right? As opposed to everything, which is unconditional love. They're coming from blackness. We're coming from light. And it's not to put, again, a divide and conquer or anything. It's not to say one is bad and one is good. It's just a basic observation that I've noticed is that some people are getting energy from putting people into a fear state and living in that fear state themselves, right? Like, and other people are challenged that and saying, I don't want to fucking live that way. And I don't care what that means, but I'm going to go find something different. And that's where I believe the seeking comes in, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, and I want to make sure that in a minute here, we jump right back over to plant medicines, but for the last 10 years, I've run a website called Waking Times, and I've personally written like 1,000 articles for it. And, you know, have a whole gaggle of writers and stuff from the world. And, yeah, I mean, if you want to pigeonhole me into the conspiracy theory place, you certainly can. But a big part of the work that I've done there is just is exploring how the mind works and how the mind is exploited in this society that we have. And so, yeah, fear is one of the cognitive functions that gives you access to the subconscious mind. And so, really, the twist that my work is taking personally in the last year or so is helping people to overcome self-sabotage and then step onto their own unique path of self-mastery. You know, it's different for everyone, but before someone can really bloom into their own fully actualized selves, like you have to get a whole lot of garbage to the advantage of corporations in the forms of marketing or government propaganda or whatever for close to 100 years. I mean, you know, the science of propaganda and mind control just, you know, really started to take root with Edward Bernays and Maurice Strong and stuff, these people in the early part of the 20th century. So like there is a science to how the subconscious mind works. And, you know, we know that we can hack into it with hypnosis. We know that we can, you know, mentalists can go on stage and do performances that set up a scenario to where all of a sudden 100 people write the same image on a piece of paper at the same time without realizing that they're all doing it. So in other words, people aren't as in control of their behavior as they think they are. And that's really I think the surprise that my work is generating in a lot of people, because you think that you're in control of your behavior, Ryan, but the reality is that the subconscious mind works in such a way that it scans the environment, it looks for the acceptable behavior through the tribe, the group. It gives you impulses to act a certain way. It doesn't understand morality. It doesn't understand ethics. It doesn't understand right or wrong. It just understands what fits in. I mean, look back in history, to me, I wouldn't. Slavery, for example, I wouldn't tolerate my neighbor having slaves right now, any of the political catastrophes, any of the genocidal catastrophes, any of the, the giant government coals of their people that have happened over the last 100 years. Like a lot of people go along with that stuff, they don't. There's a societal norm. There's a cultural norm for that time period. The subconscious mind just looks at what's happening around it and says, what's the safest path for me to get through so I don't get kicked out, rejected, and ultimately murdered by the tribe, And so there's a whole lot of that going on. And I think plant medicines have the potential to really shake people up and really like dislodge belief systems and really just unhinge these subconscious programs that we're all, just like indoctrinated with. Not to get too far into like darkness and shit, but just the reality is that even the paradigm of religion, from an early age on, it seemed to me like when it came to religion with Christianity, I grew up going to church from time to time, whatever, the experience of religion, like Jesus had the best experience of religion. Everybody else since Jesus has just been talking about his experience. I wanted to know, what is the actual experience of spirituality? Take me to the source, but you have all those beliefs and you have all that indoctrination. And so I think this is a good point to jump into the plant medicine iboga. I don't know if you know much about that, but it's a shamanic plant medicine from the equatorial regions of Africa, the rainforests of Africa. And I was introduced to that, or I was called to that. It took a couple of years. It really is like a very, very clear, stern teacher that'll show you in rapid fire succession exactly what beliefs systems you have, where they came from, why you adopted them, how they don't serve you or do serve you, how to get rid of them, how to let them go in a flash. And so people that go through that experience, I mean, it's a new type of freedom. I mean, they say that the next frontier is space, or maybe the next frontier is the deepest depths of the ocean, but that's not true. There's a vast, an infinitely vast space of freedom to be experienced within your own mind. If you can somehow dislodge all the programs and belief systems from it, and iboga is the plant medicine for that.
I love that, man. And, it was interesting too, because as you were talking about the subconscious, I kept thinking it's simply that you don't know what you don't know. With the subconscious, it's just that, it's unconscious. And so allowing ourselves to get into these states, whether through plant medicines or whether through other means that allow us to access the subconscious, allow us to actually look at ourselves for the first time without the ego and other things filtering our pure consciousness out, our pure awareness out. And that's something that I love looking at the subconscious for, because, just like you said, what I feel is so challenging is that there's so many intellects in the world, right? We've been praised for our intellectualism. And like Carl Jung says, intellectualism is a common cover-up for fear of direct experience. And so how I see that is that you have a bunch of people that can tell you all about the subconscious, right? But they've never experienced it themselves, right? And that psychiatrist you went to, he could tell you all about what addiction was, but he was never addicted to anything himself, right? And so this is is the gap I'm seeing a lot in life. And with religion, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's ultimately, I think, the biggest gap, right? And why spirituality turned into religion. What is religion? It's talking about, in this case, Jesus's experiences, his direct experiences of God, right? Of source, of universe, whatever you want to call it. And then they wrote it down. And instead of having people go through the direct experience themselves, plant medicines do, and all of these indigenous tribes have been doing for thousands of years, they started reading about it. And then once they started reading about it, they didn't know what they didn't know. And their subconscious then was like, well, I don't really like that. And, I see this happening, so I'm going to change it this way. And now we're looking at a story that may or may not have ever happened. And if it has, it was translated through hundreds of dead languages, and God knows where it actually started. But the Control Alt Delete for this is being able to have that direct experience yourself, whether through plant medicines, whether through whatever means. And so that's one of the best aspects I see for plant medicines, is to be able to Control Alt Delete people to have the direct experience of what you call God yourself. Because when you have that yourself, it's a knowing, right? You don't need to intellectually be able to explain it all, but you just have the knowing, the feeling, right? The part that society, especially in the Western world, is completely omitted, which is like, oh, these feelings. Oh, wait, Dylan, you have a feeling about something? Well, I know facts about it. It's like, well, thoughts lie, stories lie, the subconscious lies. It does everything you were talking about. It doesn't understand norms. It doesn't understand ethics. It doesn't understand these things, right and wrong. But feelings, that's something that you can depend on, because that feeling is accurate, right? Whether or not the story you put to it is accurate is another whole thing. But that feeling is something that should and needs to be noticed, because if it doesn't, then you're really using the mind for the heart's job. And that's how I feel about it.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's definitely like a number of people who don't participate in plant medicines, but who are very deep into meditative practices, transcendental meditation, whatever, yoga, this or that, and some of them will tell you that they can get to these altered states of consciousness. They can get to where you go with ayahuasca without the substance, and therefore, like, that's a superior way to arrive at that conclusion. And the reality is, again, just like you're saying, like, no, it's not the same. Like, you can transcend through those meditative states. You can transcend. You can get all the way deep into alpha, theta, whatever brain. They bring with them an entire context, an entire realm, an entire universe, an entire experience, a shared experience with them that you can't access without them. Like, the best way that I can describe this to people is the easiest way for people to see and understand this, I think, is by looking at the visionary artwork, especially the artwork of Don Pablo Maringo. He was a Peruvian artist. He was a really good friend of my teacher, and his story is really quite amazing. He was the like captain, like the head of one of the major shipping ports in Peru until he was like 50 something. And then he went into the jungle, and I don't know, somehow came across that. So he didn't start drinking ayahuasca until he was in his 50s, I think, is the story. And when he did, he went and did the dieta. He went to the jungle by himself for 7 or 8 or 10 years or whatever it was. And just, like only consumed plantain, bananas and yahe, for years and years and years. And then when he emerged from that state, what he brought forth from that was a very, very accurate, clear visual representation of what those worlds look like. And so if you look at a Pablo Maringo painting, like the vast majority of them, you're going to see it's a multi-leveled experience. At the bottom of the painting, you're going to see, usually in the center, you're going to see a group, kind of kingly looking fish standing behind them. And then outside of that, you're going to see the forest. And in the forest, you're going to see all kinds of eyes and spirits and little beings hidden in the shadows of the forest. Right above the forest is going to be what's called the pinta, this rainbow band, this like an intricate design of purples and reds and very like cool colors. And then above that, you're going to see like the lakes and the creatures in the lakes. And above that, you're going to start to see the sky and the sky creatures and the sky barges. And above that, you're going to start to see the UFOs. And then above that, you're going to start to see the temples, and those temples go up and up and up. And you can see this in so many of Pablo Maringo's painting. And you look at them, you're like, that's just absolutely beautiful. But when you walk through that space, when you experience that space, you realize that he's not making this up. Like he didn't write this. Like, I can go right to that space. I can go to those temples. I can walk those staircases in those temples. I can seek out the celestial beings that live at the peaks and the pinnacles of those places. I can walk through the halls and see phosphorescent colors that have never existed on planet Earth. I can see birds with feathers that have been extinct for 1 million years. I can see colors that don't exist. I can see, materials and beings and have hybrid. I can see all this kind of things. And these are all depicted in the painting. So in other words, there's a world out there. There's a shared space. And so discovering that, like knowing that firsthand for yourself, right, is a powerful, powerful shift for people who have been brought up and indoctrinated in this Western culture to believe that the idea of success is money, cars, and all that bullshit. Right. To use another example of this, the African tradition, the plant medicine in Boga, it's a totally different experience. You typically don't puke that much. You take it, it's a powder, you don't drink it, and you just eat it, and you go into this deep trance. And, the longest I've ever journeyed with that medicine is about 36 hours. That's a long fucking journey, bro. Yeah. That's a lot happens in 36 hours in the Boga journey, So anywhere from 12 to 36 hours. But the energy, the presence that you feel is unmistakably African, right? It's unmistakably Bwiti. Bwiti is the spiritual tradition that has been using the sacrament for, however many generations, perhaps thousands of years. Like the energy of it is unmistakably unique to the place and the people, right? And the journey itself is unmistakably unique. And in that shared space, like the shamans and what, like the top shaman that I've worked and journeyed with is, he's a 10th generation shaman from Africa. And then I have teachers that he's taught that I work with. In that experience, you can go back to the beginning of time. And when you go back to the beginning of time, everybody sees the same thing. It's not something I can talk about here, but there is, within that experience is a shared experience of how it all began. And so you can go and you can journey with this medicine. And then in the morning or the day after, the shaman will be like, did you see the beginning of time? And if you did, you'll know. And you'll be like, yes, I did. This is what I saw. And if you were right, he'll be like, that concurs, right? That adds up. That's what we all see at the beginning of time. So yeah, you're talking about completely shattering every paradigm. You're talking about shattering the scientific paradigm. Like none of the science that we're talking about that's trying to govern our lives right now makes sense in the context of these metaphysical altered, these metaphysical possibilities that are within reach of people. So I'm fascinated by that. I'm fascinated by the fact that, like, I don't have to wonder, to put a lid on that sense of wonder, to slow down, for man to slow down that search, to be like, okay. All right. I can focus on other things in my life now because I fucking know. Know, right? Yes. Just know, like I'm satisfied, I'm satiated, right? Like I get that. Like I saw what I was looking for. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I've seen it and I know that I've seen it now, so I can move on with my life. Yeah. Because, man, like you said, like we're spiritual beings, right? And this system that we're in right now, it wants to take that away from you. Like it doesn't want you to nurture that. It doesn't want you to believe in that. It doesn't want you to even talk about it. We have trigger words that we throw in everything, like I mentioned the word conspiracy theorist earlier.
Yeah, man. It's very interesting too, because one of the things that I love most in the world is language work. It's something that I've gotten so into, and I've trained with my buddy Mark England, who runs Enlifted. Angelo's really good friends with him. And this is, people don't realize, is a secret war being waged through language, right?
Yep.
And so, when people ask me, oh, so you're a conspiracy theorist? I go, no, just a theorist. And they go, well, and I'm like, well, what makes it a conspiracy? Right. And they're like, well, it's going against the norm. I'm like, oh, interesting. So when Martin Luther King wanted to stop segregation, was that against the norm? Was he a conspiracy theorist? And I started actually being like, I don't get it. Explain further. I don't get it. And it takes about 2 times that before they're like, well, actually, I don't get it either. I'm like, okay, cool. So you realize that these terms are being cast just because what's meant to happen, right, is like we were talking about before we started, how it's great to be able to have conversations with people that maybe don't agree with you, right? But you can still high five after, right? Well, that is what's leaving, because true masculinity has been damaged and beat down, because the true masculine, in my mind, can hold firm in his beliefs without needing someone else to agree with them. What Absolutely. I see right now happening is that they're telling you, if someone doesn't agree with you, you automatically have the right to call them a conspiracy theorist and discount anything further that they say, because they're complete bullshit. But we know that the same companies telling you that get shit wrong and lie straight out on the daily. I mean, their whole lives are made on lies. And so it's the same thing when you look at, the companies that are pushing certain things right now, let's just say, right? And it's like, these are the same companies that fucked the whole world up. And now all of a sudden they're the knight in shining armor. It's just like, for me, these things don't make sense. Again, look at the people getting the results you want. When I see quote unquote health officials talking about things, these are not the results I want. I don't want to look like a human skeleton when I'm 55. I don't want to be wearing dress pants. Like, these things smell like office supplies, to use that joke again, right? Like, they just don't feel right to me. And someone might go, oh, so you're just going to go on feeling? And that is only because we've all been trained, or so many of us been trained, that unless you can explain it and articulate it quantifiably, then it's not real. It doesn't exist, right? Because we've omitted the whole side of where science actually meets spirituality, which is qualitative science, right? And so what I always ask these people is, okay, so I imagine you love someone. Tell me how many units of love you have for them versus someone else in your life, right? Well, like, well, I don't know. It's like, okay, yeah, because it's a feeling, right? You can't quantify it, right? And so these quote unquote arguments or discussions that people have on, only what we can see with the eyes is real. Only what we can measure through the scientific method is real. It's like, listen, science, quantitative science is just that. It's a method. And I was talking about this yesterday on one of the podcasts I did, where I was saying that, science changes one dead scientist at a time, right? Like whoever the grand level senior scientist is, when his views, when he gets proved wrong, his whole fucking life's work is behind what he says. So some 20, 30-year-old scientist, he's going to beat that dude down until he dies, and then the new information comes out. So it's like, if people are holding science, which is created by man, quantitative science, as this gold standard, I mean, they call it the scientific method, not the scientific fact, because it's just that. It's a method, right? It's a method that, yes, can provide great results, but it's not the truth. It's a version of the truth. And it's all in the language that people spin on these things that allow people to think it's just the truth, when in reality, there's only one the truth. And in most cases, people are probably not going to like what it says and that's what you see in plant medicine experiences. That's where people have quote unquote bad trips, right? Where they're actually refuting and refusing to accept what is the truth. That's when someone has a challenging experience. And ultimately, those experiences are the best ones. I mean, really, it's just that if you don't have the right people around you to help you through that, it can be a very challenging experience.
Back up. What I'm hearing you say, you're talking about basically the scientific paradigm, the system, the culture that we have right now is really influencing people's behavior. It's influencing their ability to entertain possibility in their lives. And so, I've worked for a long time at a number of plant medicine centers. So I see the kind of people that come through, and I've seen the healing that have taken place. And I've had to be totally honest with you, Ryan, with the hundreds of people I've done ceremony with, like, there's been two experiences that I've seen that are like the scariest, most loudest, screamiest experiences. And I'm number 2 on that list. Like of all the people I've seen, I've had the second biggest freak out and having moved back to the spheres to figure out how that work translates into this environment. How I used to be able to sit with people in the space and facilitate and, like help people change their pants when they shit their pants or whatever, all that kind of crazy stuff, man. This beautiful, like real, raw human experience. But back here, that's not going on. It's illegal. I've never done medicine in the United States. I won't do it here. I don't need to. But how do you, where is the parallel between those messages and how do those translate? How do they really work for people that are in this environment that aren't willing to explore, that can't explore because of COVID? And I really feel like that's the cutting edge. It's the way that the subconscious mind is being used against us to cause us to engage in behavior that is unconscious.
Yes.
Right. And so, really, like, that's why, like, I'm just really, really excited with the twist that my work is taking and helping people understand these influences, understanding how they've been hypnotized, understanding how, like, their subconscious mind is basically just repeating, the information that they're taking from the environment. They're drinking alcohol, even though when they know it's bad for them. It's called self-sabotage. There's people self-sabotaging themselves. They are unwittingly have been placed in between themselves and their own success. Like, they become their own worst enemies, and it's no accident. And so I help people to see how that happens to them, but also how to use the same techniques to turn that around for yourself, how to use hypnosis for yourself in a positive way, how to, because the subconscious mind doesn't miss anything. I mean, it's able to take in, I don't know how they came up with this number, but 11 million or whatever bits of information per second, whereas the conscious mind is only able to process and consume hundreds of bits of information per second. Again, like, I don't know how you measure that precisely, but it makes sense. The subconscious mind doesn't miss anything. Right. And so people don't know why they're doing what they're doing. That's why people have anger reactions. People have, like, especially a person's in fear. Once that conscious function of fear has been triggered, the gateway, the doorway to the subconscious mind is open, and anything can go in and be plugged into the subconscious mind. So, I've heard people parroting this idea that unvaccinated folks need to be banned from restaurants. They need to be banned from public spaces. They need to be banned from, using phones. They need to be banned from everywhere. They're a danger, right? Like, that's not an idea that a normal person would come up with. It's not an original idea that, Sally Joe, Jane Doe down the street would be like, I've been thinking about this crisis, and the best solution I can think of is to take half the people in my town and deny them all of the luxuries of life. You know what I'm saying? Like, that makes the most sense to me. It's not an original idea. You know what I'm saying? So you can tell that people aren't, they're not themselves. Like, they can be, right? In order to access that side of yourself, you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing and how to program your own mind to get the results you want, to put it the way that you put it. But Yeah, in order to make this conversation fun, man, like it's, a lot of the work that I do deals with kind of like the dark shit in the world, and I've paid the price for that. I'll just let's go off into some funky tangents here, brother.
Yeah, let's do it.
I was involved in political movements and on the Ron Paul campaign and stuff in 2008, and this libertarian idea that we could somehow restore America to the Constitution, and I've done things like rifle marksmanship training for people, teaching these kind of, survival skills and stuff to people. So there's I've spent a good number of years like soaking up the dark side. I've read a lot of the alternative history books so regarding my first Iboga experience, I mean, the mindset I carried into that was of someone who had been like seeking truth, but was only finding like the dark stuff, and I think that a lot of that perhaps is because I grew up with some distrust of people in my house and some trauma and stuff. And so I didn't really trust the world. So I was looking at all the dark side, I was taking in all the information about 9/11, whatever you think about that. I don't care. But, to me, it was everything was a conspiracy and everybody was out to get me, Mm-hmm. And so when I went into the first Iboga experience, like all that came to the surface and it was, what's the best way? It was horrifying, to be honest with you. It was fucking scary. It was one of the scariest experiences of my life. In fact, my first couple of Iboga journeys were like that. I didn't quite fully get into the free floating space of Iboga that you get to. They called like what I was going through a detox, a mental detox, a detox of my belief systems and stuff. And what I realized, man, and this is super profound, and I want to share this with people because, like we were just talking about how the subconscious mind takes in everything. Look at the amount of negative messaging there is around you. Look at the amount of fear. I mean, right now, if you turn on the news, it's like, if you don't get the vaccine, you're going to die. Afghanistan, people are, it's bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news, bad news. Okay. That stuff is sticky. It sticks in your soul. And I didn't realize this until Iboga. And what I saw in that space was I saw all of the beliefs, all of the ideas, and it went deep. It went into nanobots. It went into, it went into archons controlling. It went into the reptilians and all this kind of stuff. Basically, any idea that I had allowed into my mind and I had entertained in my mind just was stuck somewhere deep inside of my consciousness. And though I wasn't aware of it, on a 24/7 daily basis, every image that I'd seen on the news, there was a time on the internet when you could like look up dead bodies, I used to be able to go check out and see in which clever ways the drug cartels were slaughtering people. Like there was websites you could go look at video from cartels of them hanging people and skinning people alive. I know it's fucked up, but that's the kind of shit that was out there. And when I was young, it was like the Faces of Death DVDs that came out. All of that stuff, man. I realized that moment I dropped into the Iboga space that all of it was still there, and it was still coloring my soul darkly, is the way that I like to think of it. And so what I saw a manifestation in Iboga, like you're living the experience. You're not like thinking about it. It's not like you're hallucinating. You actually close your eyes, lay down, and you live these experiences. And this is why it's such a powerful tool for people to overcome trauma and PTSD and stuff, because you get to actually relive experiences, or you get to live through experiences that haven't happened yet, or experiences that probably did happen in a parallel timeline. I mean, it's pretty exhaustive, but in my case, like I saw every bad thing happen to the world, and I went into this state where the vision that I saw was I saw all of the indigenous cultures around the earth. I saw them all colonized, like all of this within just a brief moment. You can see the whole history of time front to back with Iboga within the blink of an eye. I mean, the way that I described it to my teacher during the experience, like, how are you doing? What do you see? And I was like, I see everything all at once and right now. And he's like, absolutely, fucking everything, all at the same time in this very moment. And because of the things I had taken into my consciousness, the amount of absorption of this negative energy that I did, all I saw was darkness, man. All I saw these indigenous cultures around the world being colonized and driven out of existence. I zoomed out of the planet. I saw the planet. I was floating out in space and I saw the planet, and, I was there. Like this really happened for me. And I saw Africa, like being burnt up I saw the Amazon just like turn black. It was all cut down and just burned to a crisp. I saw the Pacific Ocean just go black and die from the radiation in Fukushima, and I just went and I just watched the planet piece by piece be killed by the greed and determination of human beings. And what was left, like when it finally all ended, it was literally just a barren, smoten chunk of charcoal floating through space, absolutely lifeless. We'd killed the mother. And so in a sense, I lived through the grief that you would experience through, seeing your own mother die, but like everyone's own mother die. And so that was like the first experience I had. And the next day it was really, really traumatic trying to recover from that and just recognize like, oh shit, like everything that I've been thinking about, I just saw happen. Okay. So the next time that I did Iboga within the same week, it was even worse, right? Like I went into this space and it was just darkness. I was on battlefields. I was seeing bodies being blown up. I was, involved in, witnessing murders, everything, Ryan. And it was insane. And so after that experience, the thing, like, not everybody's like me. I have this sort of like toughness to me, this edge. Like when I experience something like that, I take it as a learning experience. A lot of softer souls can't handle stuff like that. I've seen people never go back to Iboga, run from ayahuasca because it was too challenging. Me, I don't know if I'm dumb or what, but in the morning I'm like, wow, that was cool. Like, holy shit. Like, wow, I just learned a lot, like to me, it's growth, right? Seeing beyond what you normally see as growth. And so I had this really, really dark experience. And then the next day I called my mom to tell her all about it. My mom's awesome. So I told her all about it and she was like, gee whiz, son, that sounds terrible. She's like, did you ask it to see the light? And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, did you ask the spirit of this medicine, whatever, if you could see the light side as well? And I'm like, wow, that never occurred to me, Mom. Never occurred to me. She's like, we got another ceremony, right? I was like, yeah, we're doing another ceremony tomorrow. She was like, ask them to see the light. So I went into the ceremony. We did our talk. We dosed on Iboga, went down and laid down in the temple, and the medicine came to me, and my space began to open up. My third eye opened up, and I began to see through my face, and I began to see through the roof, and I began to see through the building, and I began to see through the fabrics of the universe. That's what happens. And I found myself all of a sudden just transformed, and I was inside of like the foyer of a beautiful house, like a happy home, a 2-story home, right? I love telling this story, man, because it means so much to me. But I'm standing in the foyer, and there's a staircase to my right going upstairs. There's like a little table to put your keys on and a coat rack. And there's the front door, and there's like a bookshelf and like this golden, filled up with this golden, beautiful, just, you feel at home, family, just this vibe. And at that time I had a family. Like I was living this life. And next to me was an angel, just a beautiful angel standing right next to me, taller than me, looking down on me. There was a woman, it was a female angel. And she was just looking at me, just smiling, admiring me, just watching to see what I would do. And I looked up at her and she looked at me kind of like, all right. And I was like, okay. And then right at that moment, the front door to the house just busts open. The door is kicked in. It hits the floor. And what comes through the door is every gross, disgusting, scary, horrifying thing I'd ever seen. So all the police brutality I'd seen, all of the 1,000 Rambo movies I'd seen, like all of that stuff, all the bodies and blood and guts just came dumped through this doorway into this beautiful space. Like it just, there's blood and guts on the floor. There's dicks chopped off. I mean, like brains, like every nasty tits. Unbelievable. Like in the detail of it all, I could still see it just clearly. And then looking out the door beyond was the blackest of black, was just, there's certain colors that you can paint things with that absorb all the lights. They absorb all the light, and it was like infinite blackness beyond. And I remember like looking at this pile of writhing, slithering blood and guts and pain and suffering and trauma. And I looked up at this angel with this look on my face, like, holy shit. And she's like, cool. What are you going to do about it? And the answer was clear. I asked to see the light. And so I reached down, I grabbed this door, which was flat on the floor. And I muscled it up, picked it up, and saw all this squishy guts and everything. And I pushed as hard as I could. I pushed and pushed and pushed. And I gave it everything I got. And I got my legs into it and all that stuff. And I slammed the door shut. All of that stuff was on the other side of the door. Back to peaceful golden light. And this angel looks to me and was like, oh, cool. That's an interesting choice. Good choice. And then an instant later, I found myself in a womb. Right, I was in a womb. I was like observing this pink baby and amniotic fluids right in this sac, and then this whoosh feeling, and that was me being born. And then I spent the rest of the journey reliving the first few years of my childhood, which was filled in my case with a lot of trauma and confusion and chaos. But I was able to do that and relive all that from the perspective of somebody who had grown up and, had realized, the truth about life. And so I was able to watch these very traumatic, formative years of my life in a completely different light. And so I was able to go to the original house I lived in and see the tile on the floor. I could see the chips on the bathtub. I could see, like the scuff marks on the carpet. I could sit in a recliner and listen to my parents fight. I could see the phone on the wall. It was all there. It's all there in my mind. And that was a beautiful, beautiful experience, and I got to see ancestors and visit grandparents and all this kind of stuff. But the takeaway for me and for me in that is that, like, there's a depth to our consciousness. There's a, you've heard of the Akashic records or that sort of stuff. Like there's a depth to human experience. There's a record of human experience that resides somewhere. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like science isn't shooting for that. I'm not counting on them figuring out, but there's a depth of experience, and nothing leaves us, right? Nothing ever fully leaves us. And so in that there's a spectrum of light, and there's this, one end is the spectrum, the blackness, on the other end is pure light. Right. And so we're all operating somewhere in between, those two points on the spectrum of light and dark. And so it's really, really easy when you don't understand that to allow yourself to drift further and further towards the darkness. I mean, I think it was Nietzsche that said, don't stare into the abyss too long or you're going to fall in, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, it's that sort of thing. And so I see that, man. I see that with people. I see how that, like that unknowing of where unconsciousness can take you, can lead you, can influence your behavior and decision making, that unknowing, that just no context for understanding how the past can color your present, and how your perspective can color your decisions, your behavior, your words, your thoughts, and I think that's one of the most powerful lessons of the book is to realize just how vast, how broad, like the spectrum is, and I've talked through this at length with some of my teachers, but like truly, like the more you're willing, like the further you're willing to go down that rabbit hole and look at the darkness, the further it expands your capacity to see the lightness, so in a sense, they're both like parts of the same structure of life and consciousness, and so to explore one is to explore the other. And so I think people, when they don't know that, it's easy to operate from a paradigm that doesn't support their health, wellness, that doesn't support, healthy relationships, or doesn't support behavior that makes you stronger, more badass, and just, like more loving, compassionate man. So very profound experience.
That's amazing, man. And, I love going into that too, because, Iboga is a medicine I have yet to interact with myself. And yet I've heard many people talk about Iboga and Ibogaine, which I understand is just an isolate, or not really an isolate, but an analog out of the full spectrum that is Iboga. And
I mean, it's not an analog. It's one of the alkaloids in it. There's 15 or 16 alkaloids. Yeah,
I knew it was an A word. Yeah, I knew it was an A word. Similar to how 5-MeO is a what's that word again? I was going to say analog again.
You were going to say analog, but you're thinking synthetic, maybe.
Yes, synthetic. Yes, thank you. And it's very same there. And one of the things that I've become aware of, and have been able to help myself with, is that people will often say, going back to the news, that how can you know what's going on in the world if you're not watching the news, right? And for these people, they really believe that what's on there is actually meant to be heard, right? And what I tell them is, listen, there's 7.5 billion people on the world, and the planet is a big place. Anything is happening right now. There's murder happening. There's a baby being born. There's a miracle happening. There's any possibility is pretty much happening in the world. And so the question then becomes, what do you choose to put your focus on? Right? Because are you going to put your focus on things that ultimately disempower you and take energy from you? Or are you going to put your attention on things that actually give you energy? And the second part of that was, you were talking about how, you can go through these challenging experiences and come out the other side almost laughing about them, right? Not necessarily laughing, but being like, yikes, that was interesting, and I find myself the exact same way. Like, I've had some extremely challenging plant medicine experiences, specifically, messing with certain things that at the time I didn't really know the power of, and this will be a good sized dose. And it was like, 10 times what I should have taken. All of those silly mistakes you make as a plant medicine lover. And so, one of the things I've noticed is that there are certain people, and, this goes back to what we were talking about with souls too, that are what I call ethereal extreme sporters. And what that means is that, like we were talking about the last frontier, right? Which is the human being, right? The unconscious, the mind, if you will, right? All of those things. And so like there are people that are like the squirrel suitors of that world, right? And that's what I see people like you and me, and I imagine a lot of people listening to the show as, is like, yeah, I don't like roller coasters and I'm definitely not going to put a squirrel suit on, but I will definitely go to the depths of my subconscious and get the shit scared out of me and come back being like, well, yikes, that was interesting. I'll try that again sometime, like that was fun, and it's so fun to me, to be able to meet other people like that, because I mean, for a long time, I just thought I was a crazy person. I'm like, why do I enjoy messing with my lease on reality? Right. And we could change out messing for changing my lease on reality. Right. Because if you think about it, the biggest fear for many people is death. And so when you interact with psychedelics, in many ways, you're having a small death process. I mean, you talk about 5-MeO or Bufo. I mean, that's legitimately as close to what I could, quantify as a death process, period. And so it's like, what makes certain people want that experience? And I don't know if I have a legitimate answer for that. All I know is it's people that enjoy extreme sporting of the mind, extreme sporting of the subconscious, extreme sporting of the human being, right? The being part that is formless of the human being, right? Most people get stuck in the human part, which is form, which is great, right? One's not inherently better or worse than the other, but far fewer are interested in the being part, the formless part of the human being. And I'm curious, like for you, like, what do you think's going on there? I mean, maybe we've already talked about it, but I'd love to, touch on that again. Like, what do you think is going on for people like you and I imagine many people listening to this that are excited to go through those experiences? Like, what do you think that means? Just older soul, just maybe they've gone through this in different lifetimes? Or do you feel there's something about this particular time that's helping people be more okay with that?
There's a quote, and I'm going to botch the quote up a little bit, and I forgot who it is, but it's everything you seek lies just beyond the other side of fear. Right. Yes. I mean, maybe perhaps you heard that. I can look it up. I'm sure Google will come right up. Right.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking to a young friend of mine who was 17 at the first time he drank yahe with the sequoia. And then he went down to the jungle and spent some time with them. And I hadn't gone down there yet, so I didn't know what it was about, but I was fascinated. And he came back and he was like, dude, the first thing to go is fear. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, the first thing to go is fear. And I remember that time I was still fearful of going down there because I was like, what if I go too deep? What if I never come back?
Yeah.
Like, what if I go so deep?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it, dude. Like, we're this world is already set up, man. Like, where can a man pursue, where can a man place that natural drive to explore, to adventure, right? Like, there's nothing for us here, man. So in a sense, I feel kind of like that is just the times, like, if there was a vast frontier beyond the Rocky Mountains that I could go explore, that might satiate me, right? I might be, if I could go to the gold rush, right? Or if I could, if I could be on that boat, the first people to go explore Antarctica, like if that was a possibility, but it's all been done, man. It's all been done. And that's why I think, like, I mean, to me, it's maybe a little bit misdirected, but some of the rich people, the billionaires, are trying to get up in space. Like they want to get their, put their mark on in space. It's that drive. It's that drive, especially for men, to explore, to adventure. But regarding fear, I mean, everything is just beyond fear. That applies to your daily life. If you're trying to pursue something in business, especially as like an entrepreneur, like it's really easy for an entrepreneur to get stuck in fear. And I know, because I've been stuck. This is one of the reasons why that's how I met you, really, is because I sought out the wisdom of Angelo from Alpha Hippie, right? Like I could see that this man was beyond a certain level of fear that I was about life. This man was moving. This man was already operating on the other side of things that scared the shit out of me. Right. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted some of that energy to rub off on me, and it fucking worked, man. So Angelo, if you're listening, bro, thank you.
Angelo is the most gangster motherfucker I've ever met in my life. I mean, talk about a guy who just exudes wisdom and he's just a prophet straight up. Right. I mean, every word that comes out of his mouth is just pure magic.
He's absolutely unique, but a lot of us have that gift, but we don't express it because, we're on this side of fear, Yes. And so in that regard, but, regarding plant medicines, like, you had mentioned the concept of letting go earlier, and I know if you start to read about shamanism and those stuff, they'll talk about, like, the common experience of dissolution of the self, of like the ego death, right? And quite frankly, the first experience that I had with yahe, drinking with two of the Sequoia elders at my friend's place in Costa Rica, like, I had several experiences that pushed me through the fear of losing my own identity, that pushed me through the fear of losing even the identity that I held as a husband, as a father, right? And in order to do that, it created the vision for me. It created for me inside my own mind the experience of my loved ones dying and being gone forever, right? And me having to move on in the world without them, right? Without them, or my identity, my name dying and falling off the cliff, and I'm out there in the universe, but I have no name. I have no anchor of an identity to latch onto, and then losing the sense of, my occupation or whatever it is that I think I fucking do, that I think makes me a productive member of society, and losing that, and that's gone. You don't have that anymore. And what you're left with, in my experience, you're left with basically just light and energy, right? And you're left with this unbelievable challenge to let go of it all, and when I had this experience, that was, one of the elders, Sequoia elders, Don Tintin Apeguayo was leading the ceremony. And I was sitting there tripping a little bit, and then all of a sudden the experience just went through the roof, and everything broke away from me. Like my identity broke away. My, like I said, my name, my job, all these things, my family broke away. I saw my kids die. I saw my wife die. It was like getting that phone call, and like your whole family died in a car accident. And it was pulling me up and above and beyond that, but I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to go any further. Like the grief of losing all that stuff was too much. And so I cracked up and I broke, kind of like a rocket trying to leave the stratosphere, right? Like they don't all make it, right? Some of them are structural, like the structural integrity isn't good enough, to get them through the atmosphere and whatnot. Yeah. And so you have things like the Challenger and all that kind of stuff, like bad shit goes on. Like it's not ready. And so I cracked up and I broke. And right when I started to crack up, and right when all the fear mounted to the point where it was let go or crack up, like I cracked up, I wasn't able to let go at that point. And what happened was the shaman basically, Don Tintin came and rescued me through song. Like he knew he was on the other side of the room, probably 20 feet away from me, but, I unmistakably knew what I was going through, and unmistakably was able to take my energy and pull it through me, through him, out into the space, so that it had a channel to go through, so that I didn't have to suffer. And that I think is like the power of being with the proper shaman, is that they're able to take you as far as you can go, right? And then they know what you can handle. And a good shaman too, like a proper one with the big, just proper, with just like a heart filled with love, someone that's there to heal, not to harm, And so magic. like an individual like that can take someone to the point, can help them to experience as far as they can possibly go, right? And then right when they get to their breaking point, you can take all that energy and send it in another direction, so that I don't have to suffer or crack up. Very, very powerful experience. But, just for fun, because this is that one time on Psychedelics podcast, probably 6 or 8 months after the first time I drank, I was back drinking again. And I had an experience where I fucking cracked up, man. Like it was a long week. I drank lots of brew. I puked a bunch. I shat in the fucking hole in the jungle 100 times, like I fasted for days at a time, like we chopped wood and carried wood up the, we did all that. And in ceremony, like everything came crashing down on me, and my heart just like got filled with a wave of sorrow and confusion and doubt and stuff. And then I sunk into this space of empathy for the suffering of others. And then I sunk even deeper into the space of empathy for the suffering of nature. And then I sunk even deeper into this sense of empathy for the suffering of our, planet, Mother Gaia, this being who we don't even know, who's given us all life, right? Like I was right in her shoes. And I had this experience of almost being like, feeling like a conduit for that energy, feeling like a conduits for Mother Earth, right? Being, a channel for her pain and suffering. And so through me, she was able to open me up uncontrollably to where I cried and I bawled and I screamed. They weren't necessarily my screams or my tears or my, it wasn't necessarily my angst, but it was the angst of every other person in the ceremony. It was the angst of the trees who had been chopped down. It was the angst of the jungle jaguars who'd been run further deep into the jungle through developments. It was the pain of the black oil being sucked out of the Amazon through pipelines. It was the pain of these, oil. It was everything. Like all of this stuff was, I almost feel like I was filleted open like Christ on a cross, and was able to, suffer on behalf of everything else. And when I did, I just broke apart. I went screaming, crying, and my teachers and my crew, the ground crew at the ceremony, they had to hold me down. They had to tie me up, right? They had to gag me. They had they had to basically waterboard me to cool me down. They had to, like they worked with me for hours to get me to stop screaming, to stop yelling, to stop thrashing, a bunch of people holding me down. And very personal, very deep experience, but I share it because like there is a magnitude of emotion that exists within a human being, like the depth of emotion that exists within a human being. And until you've had the chance to experience how deep it goes, like I said, in one direction, in the darkness, you don't really understand how far it can go in the other direction. So you're limited to a certain narrow window of that range. It's all said and done. I mean, my shaman and my teacher, basically they beat the shit out of my arm, the inside elbow of my right arm, until like I saw it, they saw it, everybody in the room saw it, like some black kind of smoke of an entity came rising out of my arm. And as soon as it left my body, I calmed down. I was in, back to becoming myself. So in a sense, it felt like an exorcism, right? And I've seen that one other time with one other person, and her experience is even more dramatic than mine. And so the promise of plant medicines is that, for those willing to go all the way to the limits of fear, there holds a deep promise of reconciliation with your soul. And it can be powerful, but a lot of people don't have the fortitude for it. And therefore I don't recommend this stuff, but that kind of healing, that kind of resolution with, just the energy of everything around you, right? That equilibrium that you find with the meaning of life all around you, man. It's so much depth to it. I'm looking out my window right now and there's all these trees and vines and shit. I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. And it's like, in that space, you can tell that like the resonance of all of that is life, every bit of it, every cell. There's a stupid stink bug crawling up my window. And as much as I hate stink bugs right now, it's life there, man.
Yes.
And that's a powerful, powerful message too from the Bwiti tradition, the spiritual tradition of Africa that uses iboga. Like one of their most powerful messages is that like our purpose here is to like we are given life. Like that is our gift. Life is a gift. Okay. Right. We choose to do with it is ours. Right. If we respect life, we're able to experience happiness. If we disrespect life, the price that we pay is foregoing our happiness. So what does it mean to disrespect life? Well, life is everything, man. If you can take from nature what you need, but when you start abusing life, you lose your happiness, right? You lose your opportunity to experience happiness. And so if it means clear cutting the forest, that's an abuse of life, right? We're overdoing it, and like the Native Americans say, like anything beyond what you need is poison, right?
Yes.
And so in that, like the message is that, cool, the trees are life, the water is life, the mountains are life, but dude, Ryan, you're life too.
Yes.
Right. Like you are life, man.
Yes.
Like people don't see that, man. Like you are life, right? You have to show yourself the same respect, the same care and love. If you abuse that in any way, whatever it is, like you're going to forgive, you're going to forgo your happiness. Right. And that explains to me, like that simple axiom, that simple perspective on life explains so much of the malaise that we have here with depression, anxiety, whatever the fuck it is. Just like when you abuse life and when you abuse yourself, it's impossible to experience happiness.
Yeah, because how you do anything is how you do everything, right? So, and it's so funny because that's what people say when they say lose yourself in the service of others. Well, why, right? Well, because you're then allowing someone else to be the mirror for your own life. And you're able to be of service to someone else means that in some way, shape, or form, whether conscious or unconscious, you recognize that person as you, right? Like not black, right, not white, not female or male, just you. And that is, once again, how you do anything is how you do everything. So the people that I see, cutting down trees and littering and all those things, right? Rather than, I won't cast judgment on them, right? Of course, because that, is like taking poison and expecting it to hurt the other person, right? But at the same time, I can use discernment to realize like those people are not actually happy when I talk to them, right? And that's what we talked about earlier with the people you see on the news and all these people, like they're not actually happy. Like you like, and you don't even have to know them personally to know that. I mean, just it's a feeling, right? And if I try to transcribe the feeling, it's like when I look at someone who's so in a state, right, where they're taking freedoms away from other people, they're playing into the mainstream. I mean, these are the kind of people you ask, how you doing? And they go, life sucks, then you die. Those are those kind of people, right? And again, not to cast a judgment on them by any means, but just to say that's not how I want my life, right? And one of the things that psychedelics have helped me do so much is instead of simply stopping there and saying, I don't want any of that, and running from what I don't want, they've then allowed me to actually ask, well, if you're running from that, what do you want to run towards? Right. And that's such a monumental shift in the mind and the heart, whatever, is to, instead of putting the focus on what you don't want, because then just like a race car driver who starts spinning towards the wall, if he looks at the wall, he's going to hit the wall. Look where you want to go. And that's one of the things that psychedelics have helped me do. And so now it's like being able to see that feeling that I felt forever and then go, okay, that is a thing. And also, how do I want to feel? Right. Well, I want to feel happy. Okay, cool. Well, that comes into spirituality and making sure that I understand that everything is alive, from the rocks to the table I'm sitting at, to everything, to the bug that just landed directly in front of me. I think we have a stink bug thing going here too. And I love that, man. You know, it's so perfect. And, you know, I'm really glad that we had that in the episode too, because, you know, that's why, you know, people can look at things like hippies and be like, oh, they're just hippies, you know, but it's like, no, they actually have a really clear understanding in a lot of cases of like the fact that, yes, the trees are alive. Yes, all these things are alive. And if you go out there raping the earth, then you're going to get raped in return. Right. And like mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, right. Not actual, but you know, you're going to end up discounting yourself in that equation.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, it's cool talking to you, because I'm like, I can use that in my life, man.
Yes.
You know, like
likewise, bro. This whole time
I explain it one way, but like, yeah, like, you know, what am I running towards? You know, like, you know, like, that's why I cherish like human connection so much. That's why, like, to me, like the greatest joy I get is deep conversations like this with people, you know, because there's always something in it that can make my life better. And yeah, you know, like evolution is, it's our birthright, man.
Yes. And you know, it's, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, you're talking about those people that life sucks and then you die people. I mean, that's an exemplification of what I'm talking about when I say that somebody's operating within a very narrow spectrum of the possibility of light and dark, you know, like that they're on this very narrow path. It's just neutral. It's just fucking gray. Like there's nothing worth it. You know, life sucks. I'll hang out, but I can't wait to fucking die. You know, like it's right there. It's the gray matter zone of just, you know, like missing out.
Yes. Yeah. It's like the answer of, well, I'm here. It's like, okay, well, what do you want to do with here? Right. Like what if we are, you know, this is going to get a little metaphysical here, but I trust I'm in the right company for this. Right. So if, you know, I think of us a lot of times as individuals, as life forms, right, of any sort, as a paintbrush. Right. And we have an empty canvas. And so it's like, it just begs the question, what do you want to paint on your canvas? Right. If you keep looking at, well, I don't like that color, and I don't like that color, and I don't like that color, and I don't like circles, I don't like triangles. It's like, well, what are you eventually going to put there? If you spend all your time talking about what you don't want on your painting, how much time are you going to have left to paint? Right. And, or if you spend so much time thinking about, well, I don't want to touch the paintbrush to paper until I know I'm a perfectionist with painting, then what's going to end up happening? You're not going to get anything done, you know? So that's one of the ways I like to think about it, you know?
Yeah. In the last couple of days, and maybe we'll wrap up with something like this, but in the last couple of days, there's been one of my reggae heroes, Lee Scratch Perry, passed away suddenly. And also we just got a call that another one of my wife's old friends, who was in her like early 40s with the two young 4-year-old twins, just passed away. We don't know why, but the message there is like, if you look at Lee Scratch Perry, I'm sure some people out there listening will know who he is, but the day before he died, he was out, you know, he was on Instagram singing and talking, and, you know, he was putting together this vision for this big communal piece of property that he was building. He was 85 years old. Right.
Yeah.
And the next day he's dead. You know, I don't know exactly what happened, but something happened, you know, 24 hours later, man, his spirits moved on, you know, and it's the same thing with my wife's friend, you know, so yeah, that's a heavy perspective, right? You know, that's an important, you know, the way like some of the Native American traditions look at it, like that's an advisor to take with you, right? Like take death with you, keep it over your left shoulder. I think even like Carlos Castaneda talks about that in the Don Juan books. You know, like use death as your advisor, you know, don't waste time. Especially for men out there, because we talked about isolation. Like isolation right now is the number one killer of everything right now.
Yes.
And I've talked to so many men. I've been doing men's work with an organization in Australia, some men's coaching and stuff, as well as like the coaching that I do. And I see that like a common thing I hear from people is that, wow, I'm really glad I reached out for help. I've had a really hard time for so long reaching out for help, you know, like I was afraid to ask for help, you know? And so, yeah, man, if you're stuck somewhere, get help, man. Get your life together. Fucking like, let's fly together, man.
Yes.
Here today, gone tomorrow, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially for men, you know, and I don't mean to discount you women. You guys have plenty of your own challenges, but one of the facts I know as a man that I've learned, and one of the reasons I do men's work, like you were saying, is because on average, men over the age of 40 have zero people they can reach out to when shit gets rough. And you want to talk about for any women listening too, like how well is your partner going to be able to show up as a husband, father, brother, friend to the people that need him if he feels as though he has no one to reach out for or reach out to. And so, that's another reason why I'm so glad we're both doing this men's work, because it's so potent, it's so powerful. And yeah, for anyone listening, if you're challenged, reach out, take that first step, because there's a lesson there waiting for you, and it's going to be beautiful on the other side. The other side is always worth it. That's my mantra when I'm going through plant medicine. The other side is always worth it.
Yeah, and plant medicine is a big experience that not everybody can have. And as a coach, I work in two areas, right? I work in the area of self-mastery. I don't like have clients that I work with forever and ever. We'll talk for a session or two, and self-mastery. A lot of people are stuck. They don't see a path to getting to their dreams, right? They don't see they don't even have an audience to receive them for their dreams, right? So many people are in marriages and in jobs and stuff, and the circumstances are just routine and habitual and day to day, and so their inner yearnings, like their true desire for their life, there's no one to receive that. There's no plan. There's no way to conceive of actually making that happen. And so I just listen to people and reflect back to them and help them to find ways where they can, jump on those paths, like little entryways, little subway ports onto those paths that they might have not have seen, it might be right in front of you, like I talked to an older gentleman who's 58 years old, and it was like, he'd always dreamed of being a martial artist. Well, where he lived, there was 4 martial arts schools. All it took was walking into one of them. Yeah. That's all it took, man.
Yeah.
And he walks by them every day, That's all it took was going into one and saying, hey, I'm curious what this is about, and but people don't see that. And the other area that I work is, like I said, overcoming self-sabotage, helping people to understand just how powerful the subconscious mind is, just how much the subconscious mind directs you towards fitting into this environment, whether the environment's unhealthy or immoral or whatever, And then in a second session, we talk about how to use those same, influences on the subconscious mind to create the life you want, to get the things out of your way that are blocking you. And so one of the things that I do is offer 15-minute free, what I call insight calls. And I brought this up because I talk about these through my website and through my newsletters and stuff. And perhaps you can put some links up for those. But
yes, but
I get people that'll sign up for these 15-minute calls, Ryan, all over the world, man, from Africa, Europe, wherever. And, to be honest with you, whatever percentage, actually pursues spending money with me, becoming a client. But it's a cool experiment, because what I'm realizing is that all over the place, like if somebody just had an opportunity to be like, oh, somebody's willing to listen for 15 minutes, dude. I mean, even that can change everything with suicide rates the way they are, with men not having people to talk to. If you can find somebody that's willing to listen to you for 15 minutes, just from a space of openness and compassion, that can change everything for you, man. Cause you hear yourself, you get a chance to hear what's going on in your own head that you've been locking down. We lock down so much in our own minds. So I just wanted to say that if anybody out there is listening, wherever you got to turn to, man, and just being able to hear yourself outside of yourself is a very powerful tool for initiating your personal transformation, for really kickstarting your own personal evolution.
Yeah. And on that same note, I'd love to, be able to plug where people can find you, and also where they can book that 15-minute insight call with you, because, I know so many people listening are going to be able to benefit from that. And so this would be a great time to throw that down. Tell me where people can find you, what you're up to, all of those fun things.
That stink bug he fell onto my desk, and now he's upside down, flailing, trying to flip him over, looking at me like I'm going to help. And I'm like, no, man, I'm not helping you.
Yeah.
Stink bug. I got love. My love only goes so far for stink bugs. But I wish I had a video of this guy flipping around. But
could be an analogy for life.
Yeah, totally. Right now, the bulk of my work is at wakingtimes.com. I've been publishing there since 2011. And, to be honest with you, lately, I've been a little focused on COVID stuff, and I'm feeling the calling to kind of move beyond back that into the more personal stuff again. But I've written lots of articles. If you just search up Dylan Charles, you'll see lots of articles that I've written about plant medicines and the experiences, with seeking that path for health versus seeking psychiatry and that kind of stuff, man. A lot of really insightful stuff. My personal work right now is hosted at shaolindylan.com, SHAOLIN Dylan.com. And that's an ode to the fact that Kung Fu saved my life. I've been a Kung Fu, I've been doing Kung Fu for 20 years. And that's really what saved me from myself, many years ago. And I'll probably figure out some cool brand, Ryan, in the future to make all this come together. But go to Shaolin Dylan. There'll be a pop-up there. You can just, I'll make sure that's plugged in. You can check out the 15-minute insight calls. And then also my podcast is called batteredsouls.com. And same thing there. There'll be ways to like get on my newsletter and stuff. And then also I have a Waking Times page on Facebook. It's Facebook, Waking Times. And, we used to publish our articles and stuff like that, but there's like the censorship and the rejection of our kind of content on Facebook is so severe that I stopped posting articles, and I'm mostly just post like perspectives on things that's happening in the world. And pretty much all of those posts, you can find links to my newsletter, which is called On the Path, to my personal Facebook pages, to my other sites and stuff. So I'm findable out there. I'm a one-man show. So I know I don't have like as tight of an organization as some people do, but I'm always cleaning things up. So if you want to find me, please find me. I love people more than anything else. And to me, like there's no greater joy than seeing somebody else evolve, like, beyond themselves. So yeah.
Amazing, man. And Dylan, this has been such an absolute blast. And I have one last question for you. If you're up for it, my man, let's do it. All right. So if someone listening was just swayed by you to experience psychedelic medicines for the first time, what piece of advice would Dylan Hunt suggest to give them the smoothest experience possible?
Depends on what they were called to do. I mean, if you're coming from a place of like exploration, if you're coming from a place of just like curiosity and like wonderment about what's out in the world, I feel like ayahuasca, yahe, is a very, very powerful medicine to sort of raise you up above everything that's happening, So if you're not coming from necessarily a place of pain or suffering, or like knowing the kind of healing that you need, like ayahuasca can be just absolutely uplifting and joyful. It's a little bit like, the messages of it can be a little bit confusing. The context of it don't always relate to the context of, like what's happening in real life. The flip side of that is that if you know that you're bearing some pain, bearing some trauma, like if you've experienced PTSD, if you have like addictions that you just can't seem to put aside, if you're, I've seen a lot of men that have come through, like I said, with porn, addictions to pornography and like, addictions to like deviant sexual behavior and stuff. If these are the things that are you're hiding, that you're repressing in your own life, if you have things like that you're trying to keep secret from everyone else, like the great spirit of Iboga can really help you to understand where that came from, and how those programs got embodied in you, and then how to also like let all that stuff go. So, and if you are interested in either of those plant medicines, please, like make sure like, you're doing them with, I mean, I don't advertise. If you wanted to know what I thought and who I would recommend you drink with, please contact me. I'll let you know, because I have a couple of very powerful traditions that I work with. And I only work with those. I don't do medicine. I've never done medicine except for one time I did medicine in one other place, but I don't do medicine outside of these traditions. I don't need to. Because the thing that I see, Ryan, is that like people are going to medicine and they're not getting what they really need, man. And the result of that is that they keep going back to the medicine and it becomes just another like event or a party or a scene.
Yeah.
If you go to the right place, man, if you go to the fucking source, if you go to the right place, if you get to the heart of the matter the first time, you'll find that you don't need to be drinking ayahuasca every month. You don't need to do 100. I met a guy like a couple of weeks ago and he's like, I've done 150 ayahuasca ceremonies. And I'm like, bro, dude, one night with the sequoia, dude, and you're done for 2 years, man.
Yeah. Like it sounds like it's not working for you,
But that's the thing. You're battling this cultural idea of more equals more, more equals better and stuff. And I'm telling you, like the depth of, if you can get to the source of the healing that you need, if you can get to the source and drill straight down into seeing what it is that you're fascinated by and what you need to see, then you won't need these medicines. I haven't done ayahuasca since 2019, since December of 2019. I haven't done Iboga since May of 2018. And I fucking guarantee you, man, like I'm learning every day from both of those experiences. Both of those experiences were so deep, were so proper, were so just like conducted in such a proper traditional way that like the learning never stops. Right. And that's what it's all about. It's not about joyriding. It's about becoming a better person. So yeah, that would be my advice. Figure out why you're doing it and then go to the source. Man, don't fuck around with it. Don't go to a weekend ceremony by some traveling shaman that's got some brew that you don't know where it came from. I mean, like go to a source, like like where I drink, like we make the brew, like we make it that day. Like we have a garden, like 20-year-old garden, you know what I mean? Like it's very contained. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your
No,
simple
that's
question, but
amazing.
that's what I got. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's like what Terrence McKenna says, when you get the message, hang up the phone. But in order to get the message clearly, you actually need to be around people who can help you integrate what that message is and what it means in your life. Because otherwise, you're just going to continue falling into a new addiction of, oh, wow, I need another experience. I need another experience. I need another experience, right? Like it's, wow. The importance is of being able to actually understand the experience. And that comes from being around people who are actually wise elders, not just elders, right? We have many elders, not too many wise elders. Yeah. That's one of the challenges, Yeah. So yeah, I love that, man. Very potent. Yeah,
medicine. let me just say this last thing. Something you said just really made me think of something. I know of a number of people who've gone and done ceremonies this or that, and then I'll talk to them a couple of years later. How you been? And then they're in the States here. They've got some group that they're drinking with every weekend, or that they're mixing mushrooms with ayahuasca. Or they're mixing it, but doing hot chuma and this. It's like, oh man, like that's not how it's supposed to be. That's not what it's about. That's not what it's about. If that's what plant medicines have become for you, then I don't know what to tell you, but like there's a deeper message there that unfortunately you've missed, and I hope that you can find your way back to it.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that is extremely potent advice as well, because I know, speaking for myself, I found myself in that, and I went completely sober for about 3 months off cannabis and everything. And it wasn't like anything crazy, but I just started noticing like, hey, it was actually with cannabis. And luckily cannabis was teaching me something like, hey, you're actually using this to numb your emotions. And really you can actually relearn how to use this to enhance your emotions and move through them. But that 3-month break changed everything for me. And ever since then, I've never been a daily user of cannabis. I try to live most of my days sober, not because I'm telling myself I need to, but because it's a clear indication of how well I'm doing. If I feel like I need to interact with things like cannabis every day, then okay, yeah, that's a problem, right? That's a challenge. On the other side, if I'm on vacation and there happens to be 5 days in a row where people are enjoying cannabis and we're having fun and we're doing things, that's different, right? So I'm not setting myself any rules, quote unquote, because that's where structure can run amok. But I'm being aware of like, is it Tuesday night and I'm alone at midnight and I feel like I need to smoke, 3 bowls right now? It's like, that might be a sign that there's something going on, So I wanted to throw that in there too.
That's a whole, we could talk about that for another hour, not today, but like we could talk like that specific thing. Like I thought you were going to ask me, like drill me about cannabis. And so I'd kind of put some thought into it, but like, I have a lot of thoughts about cannabis use and the way people are using it and the way that I use it. And just like, to me, it's one of the most addictive substances there is. And I think that goes counter to what people think about it. And that, like that's worth getting into someday perhaps, but maybe I'll have you on my show. And we can talk about
please. That. I would love to. And also, man, I'd love to have you back on to talk about that because, cool, my whole thing I'm doing now is Connect with Cannabis, this program, which is teaching people like the correct way to use cannabis and basically giving them the user manual that no one ever got when they interacted with cannabis the first time. And so, yeah, I'd love to go into that with you, man. That'd be great.
Cool, bro. Dude, it's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for having me. On the show, man. It's been a blast. Yeah,
of course. And guys, when I first heard Dylan speak in a men's development program we were both in, I knew we were going to get along famously. Anyone who can laugh through life's challenges and move through them with grace and ease is someone I immediately get curious about. This curiosity stems from my own experience and the power that becomes available when we can teach ourselves that life happens for us rather than to us, and get faster at discovering the lesson within and enjoying a nice cosmic giggle with the universe. Dylan is a living testament to what these medicines can offer us and teach us when used with reverence and conscious intention. If you heard this conversation and felt compelled to learn more about Dylan and all the wonderful services he offers, then please waste no time in reaching out to him to begin your journey in self-mastery today. Dylan, thank you so much for the work you do and for sharing your time with us today. And until next time, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.